In this video series, I'll walk you through the process of building an automated workflow in Airtable. Our example workflow is for a company that needs to email different utility providers to request the consumption data for their properties. I'll break this process into 3 separate stages. In this video, I'll show you how to automate sending out emails with different property information. In the second stage, I'll show you how to collect the information in a form connected to Airtable. And in the third stage, I'll show you how we can automatically keep track of what information we have received and which properties are still outstanding. Just to note that all the property information that you'll see in this tutorial is just generated from ChatGPT, but I've also included the links in case you wanted to use them as you test this out and as you build your workflow. Let's get started building our workflow. So we'll start from scratch, and we can make some quick changes to how this looks, just so it's nicer for me to look at. I'm going to name this Email Automation. Now I want to bring in my data. So I have 2 tables that I just have stored in Google Sheets that has the property specific information as well as the email addresses for my utility providers. So I'm going to import my data, and you can see here that there's a few other sources you can use, like an Excel spreadsheet. In my case, I'll just connect to Google Sheets and select the workbook that I want to create a new table with. Next, we'll check what the data types are for these columns. So you can see here that Airtable's already automatically assigned a data type, which may or may not be correct. The safest option is to bring things in as text, unless you know, for example, with gross floor area, that's going to be a number for our ID and our account number. These have been assigned as number. I'm just going to switch those to text to be safe. It thought that our property tax number was a date, so I'm just going to switch that. And then our other table with our utility providers, the one that's important here is we want to make sure that this is set as an email. My other tab, I just had my example email that I wanted to send, so I only want to bring in these 2 tables. So I'll switch that from all sheets to just the 2 tabs that I want and import it. Cool, our data is all here. I'm going to link the utility provider that exists in this column, in this table, with the utility provider information that I have on this table. So I'll change my field type from single select to link to utility provider table and allow linking to multiple records and save. The reason we didn't do this right off the bat when we were importing the data is you can't link the tables until they both exist in Airtable. And the information I'm looking up is the email address of that provider. So I'll add that field. I'm also going to add a few other columns to help us with our automation. So one of them is going to be year of request. And we'll say that we want the information for 2024. And you can see that Airtable is a lot like Excel, where you can just type into a cell, you can drag down if you want to quickly add it across. And the other 2 columns that I'm going to add are trigger email send as a checkbox and email sent as a checkbox. Now we have everything that we need to build our automation. So we will click over on automations and add a trigger event. So we're saying, what is it that will cause Airtable to start running this automation? So our trigger event is going to be when a record matches a condition. Our table was our property data, and the condition that we wanted was when trigger email send is checked off, so that you can go in, check off your box in the table, and it'll send the email for you. You can pick for actions to be triggered by that checkbox. I'm using Gmail, but you can also use Outlook, other platforms. So I'm going to send a Gmail email. Since this is just a demo, I'm going to send this to myself. But the way that you would change a to field to be dynamic so that it's picking up that email that we wanted would be that we select the field email from utility provider as the value. I'd also recommend using your own email address when you're setting up the automation so that you can test it and make sure that you're happy with the content that's going to be emailed out for you. So I'll just name this EWRB large building request. And you can draft your message in here to have a pre-drafted email that I'll paste in, and also put in placeholders of where I want that information to change for every email that I send out. For example, utility type. The way that I would do that is by clicking on this plus button and picking the field that I want to enter. In my case, it is utility type. The year was that 2024 column that we added. For the property specific data, I could either pick these one by one, or I can put that whole record, being that entire row, as a list or as a grid, and grid is just like a little table. So I'm going to go with grid because it'll let me easily select off all the information that I want to include, and I'll exclude these last fields since those ones were mostly for me. You can also add attachments for things like an authorization letter, and I also want to add that check that just lets me know that the email was sent. So we're going to update a record, meaning we're going to update information in one of the tables, being our property data, and we're going to pick the Airtable record ID because that just means we're continuing to use the same row that we were for the previous steps. And I want to update that column so it says email sent with a little checkbox when it is sent. I'm going to rename this as well. Let's say AWRB request. So let's test this out, and we should start seeing these emails being sent out. And you can see, in the span of a minute, all those emails came through. Cool, we have our email over here, the electricity use in year 2024, and the details of the property. In the next video, we can look at how to create a form so that we can collect all of that information and store it in Airtable. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me.